The perfect suburban neighborhood hit a monster when HOA President Karen Miller buried my 3-day-old daughter alive and left my wife to die over trash cans left out. Past 6 p.m., she awakened something dark inside me. She had no idea. She just declared war on the wrong father before watching. Full story comment below from where you watching. Also, like and subscribe for more stories. The sun was setting over Maple Grove, painting the sky in beautiful shades of orange and pink. Every house in our neighborhood looked perfect, like something you would see in a magazine. The lawns were cut short and green. The mailboxes all matched in the same shade of black, and the sidewalks were spotless without even a single crack. I stood on my front porch, holding my newborn daughter Lily in my arms. She was so small, so perfect, weighing only 6 pounds and 3 ounces. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and I felt my heart melt completely. This was what pure happiness felt like. My wife, Sarah, was inside, sleeping peacefully after the hardest 3 days of our lives. The birth had been much more difficult than we expected. The doctor said she needed lots of rest, and I was trying my best to let her sleep while taking care of our beautiful baby girl. But seeing Lily's perfect little face, hearing her soft baby sounds, made all the worry and exhaustion fade away. We had dreamed of this moment for so long, through 2 years of trying, through the scary moments during pregnancy, through the long hours of labor. We had painted her room a soft yellow because we wanted the gender to be a surprise. We had bought dozens of tiny clothes in every color, soft blankets that we washed 3 times to make them extra animals that would keep her company. We had read every single book about being parents, attended classes, and talked to other couples about what to expect. We thought we were ready for anything, but we were not ready for Karen Miller. I heard the sharp, angry click of high heels on concrete before I saw her. Karen Miller marched up my driveway like she owned the entire neighborhood. She was the president of our homeowners association, and she took that job more seriously than a general takes war. She carried her clipboard like it was a weapon, designed to destroy anyone who broke her precious rules. And her cold blue eyes scanned my property, hunting for anything that was even slightly out of place. Karen was 52 years old, with gray hair pulled back so tight it made her face look mean. And she always wore expensive clothes that made her look important. She had been the HOA president for 8 years, and in that time, she had turned our neighborhood into her personal kingdom, where she was the queen, and everyone else had to obey her every command. Michael Reed, she shouted so loudly that Lily jumped in my arms and started to cry. Your trash cans are still sitting at the curb. It's already past 6 o'clock in the evening. You know very well what the rules say about trash cans. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm and not wake Sarah. Lily started to cry harder, her little face turning red, and I rocked her gently while trying to keep my voice quiet. Karen, please keep your voice down. I've been at the hospital for 3 straight days. Sarah just had the baby yesterday morning. I honestly haven't had time to think about trash cans. Karen's face didn't soften even a tiny bit. If anything, she looked even angrier than before. Her eyes got colder and her mouth turned into a nasty frown. I don't care about your personal problems or your family situations, she said, writing something on her clipboard with sharp, angry strokes of her pen. Rules are rules and they apply to everyone equally. This neighborhood has very high standards that we all agreed to maintain. You're making all of us look bad to the other communities. I wanted to tell her exactly what I thought about her stupid rules, but Lily was getting more and more upset. Her little cries were getting louder, and I could see her tiny hands shaking. The last thing I wanted was for her crying to wake up Sarah, who desperately needed sleep to recover from the difficult birth fine. I said through teeth that were clenched so tight my jaw hurt. I'll take care of it right now. Karen, just please lower your voice. You better take care of it immediately, Karen said, looking at my innocent baby daughter with complete disgust in her eyes, like Lily was something dirty and unwanted. And while you're at it, that mailbox is clearly crooked. It's making the whole street look sloppy and unprofessional. Fix it by tomorrow morning, or you'll receive a $500 fine in the mail. I looked at my mailbox, squinting in the fading light. It wasn't crooked at all. It was perfectly straight, just like it had been since we moved in 2 years ago. She was just looking for any excuse to punish me, any reason to make my life harder during what should have been the happiest time in my life. Okay, Karen, whatever you say, I said, because I was too tired and too focused on my crying daughter to fight with this miserable woman. Karen gave me one last nasty look that made me feel like I was something disgusting. She had stepped on, then turned and walked away. Her high heels clicked loudly on the pavement, each step sounding like a small hammer hitting the ground. I watched her go, feeling a mixture of anger and helplessness. That made my stomach feel sick. This was supposed to be the most beautiful, peaceful time of my life. I was supposed to be enjoying every moment with my new daughter and helping my wife recover. Instead, I was being harassed by a bitter old woman who cared more about trash cans than human happiness. I brought in the trash cans one-handed, still holding Lily against my chest. She had finally calmed down and was looking up at me with her dark eyes that reminded me so much of Sarah. She had the same long eyelashes, the same sweet expression, the same way of looking at the world like it was full of wonder. "Don't worry, baby girl," I whispered to her as I carried her back inside. "Daddy won't let anyone hurt you or upset you again. I promise I had absolutely no idea how terribly wrong I was, or how much I would regret making a promise I couldn't keep." That night I slept more deeply than I had in weeks. The baby was quiet and peaceful. Sarah was resting comfortably, and I thought we could finally start our new life as a real family. I dreamed about teaching Lily to ride a bike, about family vacations, about watching her grow up in this safe, quiet neighborhood, but around 2 in the morning. I heard Sarah screaming. It wasn't the tired cry of a new mother or the frustrated sound of someone dealing with a crying baby. It was pure, absolute terror. The kind of scream that comes from the deepest part of your soul. When something unspeakably horrible is happening. I shot up in bed like I had been hit by lightning, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Sarah," I called out, but there was no answer. I looked around our bedroom quickly. She wasn't there. Neither was Lily. I ran into the living room, calling both their names over and over. The front door was standing wide open, letting in the cold night air that made me shiver in my thin pajamas. My blood turned to ice water. Something was very, very wrong. I grabbed my cell phone from the kitchen counter and ran outside. In just my pajamas and bare feet, the concrete was cold and rough under my feet. But I barely noticed the street was completely empty and quiet, lit only by a few dim streetlights that created long, scary shadows everywhere. Then I saw her. Sarah was lying on our front lawn completely still, not moving at all. There was something dark spreading across the grass underneath her, and my brain refused to accept what I was seeing. "Sarah," I screamed, running to her as fast as I could and dropping to my knees beside her. Her face was white as paper, whiter than I had ever seen anyone's face. Her breathing was so shallow and weak that I could barely see her chest moving. Blood was coming from somewhere, but in the darkness I couldn't tell where it was coming from. "What happened? Where's Lily?" I asked desperately, but Sarah could barely speak. Her eyes were having trouble focusing on my face. "Karen," she whispered, her voice so weak and shaky that I had to lean down until my ear was almost touching her lips. She took our baby." My entire world stopped existing. Everything went completely silent, except for the sound of my heart beating so hard and fast that I thought it might explode right out of my chest. Time seemed to freeze, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except stare at my wife's pale face. "Where is she, Sarah?" "Where's our baby girl?" I asked, shaking her shoulders gently, trying to keep her awake and conscious. But Sarah's eyes rolled back in her head, showing only white, and she went completely limp in my arms. Her head fell back, and I could barely feel her breathing anymore. "Stay with me, Sarah. Don't leave me," I screamed, shaking her harder, but she didn't respond at all. With hands that were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the phone. I dialed 911. The operator answered on the first ring. 911, what's your emergency, please? I need help right now. My wife is hurt really bad. She's bleeding and unconscious, and someone took our baby. Please hurry. I gave them our address, my voice breaking and cracking with panic and fear. Sir, I need you to stay calm. Help is on the way. Can you tell me if your wife is breathing? I put my face close to Sarah's mouth and nose. Yes, but barely. It's very weak. There's blood everywhere. And my 3-day-old baby is missing. The ambulance will be there in less than 5 minutes. Sir, stay on the line with me. While I waited for the ambulance, still holding the phone to my ear, I looked around our yard desperately. There had to be some sign of where Lily was, some clue about what had happened to my innocent baby girl. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop, and my legs feel like they might collapse underneath me, near Sarah's beautiful rose bushes, the one she had planted when we first moved in. There was a small mound of fresh, dark dirt. It was too neat and too perfect to be natural. It looked exactly like someone had dug a hole and then filled it back in. Very carefully, my hands started shaking even worse, as a thought entered my mind that was so horrible, so evil that I didn't want to believe it was possible. No human being could be that cruel. Nobody could be that evil, especially not to a tiny, innocent baby. But the dirt was soft and loose, not packed down like the rest of the yard. Without even thinking about what I was doing, I started digging with my bare hands, my fingernails breaking against the dirt, soil getting deep under my skin and making my hands bleed. Please, God, please don't let this be what I think it is. I kept saying over and over like a prayer. 3 feet down, my fingers hit something soft, something that felt like fabric. My heart stopped beating completely. It was a blanket, Lily's soft yellow blanket that we had bought special for her, the one that matched her room. I dug faster than I had ever moved in my life, throwing dirt everywhere, not caring about anything except getting to my daughter. And there she was, my tiny, perfect daughter wrapped in her yellow blanket. With dirt in her soft baby hair and smeared across her little face, she wasn't moving at all. She looked dead, Lily. I screamed so loudly that dogs started barking all over the neighborhood. I pulled her out of the ground as carefully as I could, brushing dirt away from her face with shaking fingers. For what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, she was completely still and silent. I held her against my chest, feeling for any sign of life, any movement, any breath. Then just when I thought my heart was going to stop forever, she made a small, weak sound. It was barely a whisper, but it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard in my life. "You're okay, baby girl. Daddy's got you. You're safe now." "Daddy's here," I said, crying so hard that I could barely see her face. I held her tight against my chest, trying to warm her up, trying to protect her from everything bad in the world. She was alive, but she was so weak, so cold, so still. I could feel how hard it was for her to breathe. The ambulance came screaming down our street, red and blue lights flashing everywhere, lighting up the whole neighborhood like it was daytime. The paramedics jumped out and rushed over to help Sarah, while I stood there covered in dirt from head to toe, holding my daughter who had been buried alive by a monster. One of the paramedics, a kind woman with gray hair and gentle eyes, came over to me. "Sir, I need to check the baby's condition," she said softly. "You did an amazing job finding her. You saved her life. Is she going to be okay?" I asked, not wanting to let go of Lily even for a second. "We need to get her to the hospital right away to check her breathing and make sure she doesn't have any dirt in her lungs," the paramedic said. "But you found her in time. That's what matters." They loaded both Sarah and Lily into the ambulance. I wanted to go with them, but the police had arrived and needed to ask me questions about what had happened. A young officer with a serious face and a notebook pulled me aside. "Mr. Reed, I know this is a difficult time, but I need you to tell me exactly what happened here tonight." I told him everything I could remember. About Karen's angry visit earlier that day, about waking up to Sarah's screams, about finding my wife unconscious and my daughter buried in our yard. But even as I spoke, I could see in the officer's eyes that he thought my story sounded crazy. "Do you have any actual proof that Miss Miller was involved in this incident?" the officer asked, writing notes on his pad. "My wife said Karen took her. She said Karen's name right before she lost consciousness. That should be proof enough." The officer nodded, but I could tell he wasn't really convinced. "We'll definitely need to speak with Miss Miller, but without any witnesses or physical evidence that directly connects her to what happened." I felt anger rising in my chest, hot and dangerous like lava. "Officer, my 3-day-old daughter was buried alive in my own yard. My wife is unconscious and bleeding. What more evidence do you possibly need?" "I completely understand that you're upset, sir, and I don't blame you at all. But we have to follow proper legal procedures if we want to build a case that will hold up in court." About 20 minutes later, Karen arrived to give her statement. She had taken time to change into a nice dress and fix her hair and makeup, looking like the perfect concerned neighbor who was just trying to help. "Officer, I saw Sarah wandering around outside in her nightgown earlier tonight," Karen told the police, her voice full of fake worry that made me sick to my stomach. She seemed very confused and disoriented, like she didn't know where she was or what she was doing. I thought maybe she was having some kind of mental breakdown. From giving birth, you know how hormones can affect new mothers. It was a good story, too good. And it sounded much more believable than my story about buried babies and attempted murder. I tried my best to help her. Karen continued dabbing at her eyes with a tissue like she was crying. But when I approached her, she became aggressive and pushed me away. That's when she fell down. I didn't see any baby with her. Maybe she was hallucinating or something. The police took careful notes of everything Karen said. They also took photos of the scene and collected some evidence. But I could see that they believed Karen's story more than mine. She was calm and well-dressed and sounded reasonable. I was covered in dirt, emotional, and talking about people burying babies alive. Who would you believe at the hospital? I sat in a chair between 2 beds in the intensive care unit. Sarah was in a coma from internal bleeding, caused by falling down our concrete front steps. the doctor said. Someone had definitely pushed her with significant force, but they couldn't prove it wasn't just an accident. Lily was in a tiny incubator, connected to machines that helped her breathe. The dirt had gotten into her little lungs, and her body was working very hard to stay alive. She looked so small and helpless, with all those tubes and wires attached to her. I held Sarah's cold hand and watched Lily's tiny chest rise and fall with each breath. Both of my girls were fighting for their lives because of that evil woman's cruelty. And the worst part was that there was nothing I could do to make the police believe me. That's when I felt the old me starting to wake up deep inside. Before I met Sarah, before I moved to Maple Grove, before I became a simple mechanic who fixed cars and dreamed of a quiet suburban life, I was someone completely different. Someone much more dangerous. In the underground fighting world of Chicago, they called me Reaper Reed because I ended fights quickly and brutally. I fought with my fist for money, and I was very, very good at it. I had grown up poor in a bad neighborhood where you learned to fight, or you didn't survive by the time I was 25. I was making good money fighting in illegal matches, in warehouses and basements. I was undefeated in 37 fights, and people were scared of me. But when I met Sarah at a little diner, where she was working nights to pay for nursing school, everything in my life changed. She was so beautiful, so kind, so completely different from the dark, violent world I lived in. She made me want to be a better man, the kind of man who deserved her love. So I left the fighting world behind, moved to the suburbs, learned how to fix cars, and became the gentle husband and father that Sarah deserved. I thought I had buried the Reaper forever, now sitting in that hospital room, watching my family suffer because of Karen's evil actions. I felt the Reaper stirring inside me, like a sleeping monster that was starting to wake up. He was hungry for justice, and he didn't care about police procedures or legal evidence. The police investigation went absolutely nowhere. Karen's story never changed, and there was no physical evidence that directly connected her to what had happened to my family. A week later, they officially closed the case, calling it an unfortunate accident, with no criminal charges to be filed. But I wasn't giving up, not by a long shot. I started watching Karen very carefully, learning everything about her daily routines. She jogged around the neighborhood every morning at exactly 6 miles. She went to the grocery store every Tuesday at 10 in the morning. She attended HOA meetings every Thursday evening at 7. At the community center and late at night, when she thought nobody was watching, she would take long walks around the neighborhood, peeking into windows and looking for rule violations. I also started talking to our neighbors, really listening to their stories about Karen for the first time. What I learned made me even angrier than before. Mrs. Peterson, the sweet old lady who lived 3 houses down, told me that Karen had poisoned her little dog Rex because he barked too much during the day. I found him dead in my backyard with no explanation, she said with tears in her eyes. The vet said it looked like poisoning, but I could never prove it. Mr. Williams, who lived across the street, said Karen had keyed his car because he had parked it 2 inches over his property line. I saw her do it through my window, he said. But when I confronted her, she denied everything and threatened to fine me for making false accusations against an HOA board member. The Johnson family whispered that Karen had destroyed their beautiful flower garden in the middle of the night because she didn't like the colors they had chosen. We woke up one morning and all our flowers were dead, Mrs. Johnson said someone had poured bleach all over them. Everyone in the neighborhood was afraid of Karen Miller, but nobody had ever dared to fight back against her. She had too much power, too much control, and she was too smart about covering her tracks. Until now, I spent my days at the hospital with my family, and my nights planning Karen's downfall. Sarah woke up from her coma after 2 long weeks, weak and confused, but alive. When she saw me sitting beside her bed, she started crying. I'm so sorry, Michael. I should have been stronger. I should have been able to protect our baby girl. This is absolutely not your fault, I said firmly, holding her hand tight. You did nothing wrong. Now I need you to tell me exactly what happened that night. Every single detail you can remember. Sarah's memory was still fuzzy from the head injury, but slowly, piece by piece, the full story came together. She had heard a strange noise outside around midnight and had gone to the window to see what it was. Karen was in our front yard with a shovel, digging a hole near the rose bushes. I put on my robe and went outside to ask her what she was doing. Sarah said, her voice shaking with the memory. She told me she was removing a dead plant. That was against HOA regulations. But Michael, there was no dead plant there. Our roses were perfectly healthy. What happened next? When I told her that she needed to leave our property immediately, she got furious. She started yelling about how we were ruining the neighborhood with our crying baby and our lazy attitude toward the rules. She said we didn't deserve to live in such a nice place. Sarah started crying harder, and I squeezed her hand to encourage her to keep going. I tried to go back inside to wake you up and call the police, but she grabbed my arm really hard. We struggled, and she was much stronger than I expected. She pushed me backward, and I fell down the front steps and hit my head on the concrete. Everything went black after that. My hands clenched into fists so tight that my knuckles turned white. She took Lily while you were unconscious and bleeding. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. Michael, I'm so sorry I wasn't strong enough to stop her. I failed as a mother. You did everything exactly right, I said, kissing her forehead gently. You tried to protect our home and our baby. Now let me handle the rest. Little Lily was getting stronger every day. The doctor said she would recover completely from her ordeal, but it would take several more weeks. Every time I looked at her in that incubator, surrounded by tubes and machines that were keeping her alive, my anger toward Karen grew hotter and more dangerous. Using skills I had learned during my darker days in Chicago, I started my own investigation into Karen's life. I hacked into her email accounts and bank records, using techniques that weren't exactly legal but were very effective. What I found made me sick to my stomach. Karen had been systematically stealing money from the HOA budget for over 3 years. She would submit fake receipts for repairs that were never done, inflate the cost of real work, and pocket the difference. Over $50,000 had disappeared into her personal bank accounts. But financial crimes weren't enough punishment for what she had done to my family. I created a fake identity as a roofing contractor named Dave Thompson and sent Karen an email about repairing the community center roof. At a discounted price, she responded within hours. Immediately interested in another opportunity to steal money from the neighborhood budget, we arranged to meet at an empty lot on the edge of town for what I told her was a preliminary site inspection. She agreed to meet me there at 9 a.m. on a Thursday night when nobody else would be around. The night of our meeting, I arrived at the empty lot an hour early. I hid small cameras in the trees around the perimeter and tested them to make sure they would record everything clearly. Then I waited in the shadows for Karen to arrive. She showed up exactly on time, carrying her clipboard and wearing her fake smile that she used when she was about to take advantage of someone. Mr. Thompson, she called out, looking around for the contractor who didn't exist. I stepped out of the shadows where I had been waiting, and her fake smile disappeared instantly. Michael Reed, what are you doing here? Where is Mr. Thompson? There is no Mr. Thompson, Karen, I said in a calm, quiet voice that I knew would be more frightening than shouting. There's just you and me, and we have some very important things to discuss. She took several steps backward, suddenly looking nervous for the first time since I had known her. Discuss what if this is about that night with your wife? I already told the police everything I know. Your wife had a terrible accident, and I tried to help her. My wife didn't have an accident, I said, my voice getting lower and more dangerous with each word. You pushed her down concrete steps hard enough to put her in a coma. Then you took my 3-day-old daughter and buried her alive in my yard. Karen laughed, but it sounded forced and fake. You're completely insane, Michael. You have absolutely no proof of any of these ridiculous accusations. I pulled out my phone and played the video I had finally found. After going through hundreds of hours of security footage from the cameras I had hidden around my property. It clearly showed Karen sneaking into my yard in the middle of the night, carrying a shovel, looking around carefully to make sure nobody was watching, then digging a small hole near the rose bushes. Karen's face went completely white as she watched herself on the screen. That video doesn't show what you think it shows, she stammered, but her voice was shaking. Now it shows exactly what I think it shows, I said calmly. It shows you digging a grave for my newborn daughter. I threw a thick folder at her. Feet it hit the ground and scattered papers everywhere. Bank statements, forged receipts, email printouts, and financial records. That proved she had been stealing from the HOA for years. And this, I continued, is what every single person in the neighborhood is going to see tomorrow morning when they find copies in their mailboxes. Unless, of course, you do exactly what I tell you to do. Karen bent down frantically to grab the scattered papers, but I stepped forward and caught her wrist in a grip that made her gasp in pain and fear. You don't know who I am, Karen, I said quietly, letting just a small amount of the Reaper show in my voice. In my eyes, you picked the wrong family to terrorize. For the first time since I had known her, Karen Miller looked genuinely scared. The next morning, I made good on my promise. I had spent all night making copies of the video and financial evidence, and I personally delivered them to every single house in Maple Grove. By noon, there were angry neighbors gathered on Karen's front lawn, shouting and demanding answers. An emergency HOA meeting was called for that same evening. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood, and the community center was packed with more people than I had ever seen at one of these meetings. Karen sat at the front table, her hands shaking visibly. Her perfect appearance finally cracked and broken. I want to address the rumors that have been circulating today. She began, her voice barely above a whisper. I admit that I made some financial mistakes over the years, but I never intended to hurt anyone in this community. What about the Reed baby? Someone shouted from the back of the room. You buried that innocent child alive. That's not, I didn't mean... Karen looked around the room, desperately searching for even one friendly face, but found nothing but anger and disgust. You have to understand the enormous pressure I was under, trying to keep this neighborhood perfect and maintain our property values. By stealing our money for 3 years, yelled Mr. Williams, standing up and shaking his fist. By poisoning innocent pets, added Mrs. Peterson, her voice full of pain, by terrorizing families with newborn babies. I said, standing up slowly in the back of the room. All eyes turned to me. I had never spoken at one of these meetings before, had never wanted to get involved in neighborhood politics, but now I had everyone's complete attention. My daughter is exactly 3 weeks old today, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the completely silent room. She spent the first week of her life in an intensive care unit, fighting to breathe, because this woman buried her alive in my front yard. My wife has permanent nerve damage in her back from being pushed down concrete steps by this woman. All of this happened because our trash cans were still sitting at the curb after 6 o'clock in the evening. The room erupted in angry voices. People were shouting, some were crying, and someone in the front row threw an empty water bottle that hit Karen in the shoulder. She flinched and started crying real tears for the first time, but I felt absolutely no pity or sympathy for her. The police arrived about an hour later. This time, they had more than enough evidence to arrest Karen Miller for attempted murder, aggravated assault, and embezzlement of community funds. As they put the handcuffs on her wrists, she looked directly at me with pure hatred burning in her eyes. You think you've won something here? She hissed like a snake. This neighborhood will completely fall apart without my leadership. You'll see how much you need me when everything goes to hell. I walked up to her, close enough that only she could hear what I was about to say. This neighborhood will be better than fine without you, I whispered back. It will be free for the first time in years. Free from fear, free from your cruelty, and free from your evil. Karen Miller was eventually sentenced to 20 years in prison. The stolen money was recovered through the court system and used to build a new playground and improve the community center. A new HOA president was elected. Mr. Johnson, a kind and fair man, who actually cared about the families living in our neighborhood instead of just enforcing arbitrary rules. Sarah recovered completely from her injuries, though she still had nightmares sometimes about that terrible night. Lily grew stronger and healthier every day, becoming a happy, smiling baby who brought joy to everyone who met her. Our house became the center of neighborhood gatherings, with children playing safely in our yard and neighbors stopping by regularly for coffee and conversation. But I carried the memory of those dark weeks with me every single day. The absolute terror I felt while digging my daughter out of that makeshift grave. The helplessness of watching my wife fight for her life in a hospital bed. The rage that had nearly consumed my soul when the legal system failed to protect my innocent family. I had been forced to awaken the Reaper inside me to get justice for my girls. But I made a solemn vow never to let that dark side of my personality take control of my life. Again, Sarah never asked me exactly how I had managed to get all that evidence against Karen, and I never told her the complete truth. Some secrets were better left buried forever. One peaceful evening, as I sat on the same front porch where this nightmare had first begun, holding Lily while Sarah worked happily in her rose garden, I felt truly at peace for the first time in months. My daughter gurgled and laughed, reaching toward the beautiful sunset with her tiny hands. What are you thinking about so seriously? Sarah asked, coming to sit beside me on the porch swing we had installed. Just thinking about how incredibly lucky we are, I said, kissing the soft top of Lily's head. We survived something that could have destroyed us, and we're stronger now. Sarah leaned against my shoulder, and I could smell her shampoo and feel her warmth. You saved us, Michael. I don't know exactly how you did it, and maybe I don't want to know all the details, but you saved our family. I held both my girls close to me, watching the sunset over Maple Grove. The neighborhood looked exactly the same as it had months before, but absolutely everything was different now. The fear that had hung over everyone like a dark cloud was completely gone. The anger was gone. The constant worry about breaking meaningless rules was gone. In place of all that negativity, there was something I had never expected to find in suburbia. A real sense of community where people actually cared about each other. Lily would grow up safe and happy here. surrounded by neighbors who looked out for each other. Instead of searching for reasons to complain, she would play in yards where flowers grew wild and beautiful. Instead of in perfect sterile rows that nobody was allowed to enjoy, she would know without any doubt that her father would do absolutely anything to protect her, and that sometimes doing the right thing meant fighting back against evil. Karen Miller's reign of terror was finally over. My family was safe and healing. The neighborhood was free to be a real community again, and that was more than enough for me. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, I made a quiet promise to my sleeping daughter. Nobody will ever hurt you again. Baby girl, Daddy will always make sure of that. And I meant every single word with all my heart.